issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this February 28th, 2018 day. This is the Millennial Roundtable of Point of View, and I'm your host, Nick Pitts, and I'm so grateful that you decided to join us today. We have got a packed show for you today. We're going to be talking about the Second Amendment rights when we have, especially with the recent news, just even this morning, that Dick's Sporting Goods has decided to stop selling particular guns. We'll be exploring that, as well as we'll be talking about, should Reverend Billy Graham lie in the Capitol Rotunda, and then dumb things in a smart era, the resurgence of the flip phone. And we'll be talking about all that and more, but obviously we'll be taking some of your phone calls. But joining me at the roundtable today, we have got Kerby Anderson. Kerby, how are you?
I'm the honorary millennial.
Honorary millennial.
Because you are the two millennials.
We're gonna
make sure to separate there.
Yes.
And then we've also got Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute. How are you, Chelsey?
I'm good on this rainy afternoon.
I know, it's so rainy outside, which just makes it all the more better that you should be listening to Point of View, and you can listen to it on your local radio station, or you can tune in on Facebook. Facebook.com/Point of View Radio. I'm looking right at you, Facebook, and so we hope that you'll tune in, as well as call in to be able to leave a message or maybe share your point of view or your comments. You can do that either through Facebook or just call in on the old texting machine. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? One of the nation's largest sporting retailers, Dick's Sporting Goods, said Wednesday morning it was immediately ending sales of all assault-style rifles in its stores. The retailer also said that it would no longer sell high-capacity magazines and that it would not sell any gun to anyone under 21 years of age, regardless of local laws. Much of this is in response to the Parkland shooting. What we know is that the shooter, who will not be named, the shooter actually purchased one of his guns at Dick's Sporting Goods. And now Dick's Sporting Goods has decided that they're backing up on that and deciding not to sell those guns. In response, Mr. Stack, who is the leadership at Dick's Sporting Goods, said, quote, "When we saw what happened in Parkland, we were so disturbed and upset. We love those kids and their rallying cry. Enough is enough. It got to us. We're going to take a stand and step up and tell people our view and hopefully bring people along the conversation." Kerby? Wow.
It is a free country, and you are in the world where you can make those decisions or not. Those of us a little bit older remember when Michael Moore did Bowling for Columbine, and as a result of some of his pressure, had Walmart decide to change some of their policies. Dick's is doing the same thing. But again, they're going to have to think through long-term what they are really saying. Are they just going to close down their gun department? Which might make sense, because most of the people that work at Dick's are into sporting goods and outfits and basketball and things like that anyway, and it's often usually the corner of the store, so that's one issue. But again, if they're saying assault weapons, well, let's just think this through, because almost all the guns they sell use some kind of magazine. Mm-hmm. We're not just talking about AR-15s. We're talking about AK-47s, although I don't think they sell that. But almost any hunting rifle, unless it's a bolt-action rifle, uses a magazine. Virtually every pistol or handgun, except for maybe a revolver, uses one. So how far do they want to go on that? It would almost be simpler if they say, we're just not going to sell guns anymore, because to say we won't sell an AR-15 because it looks more dangerous but will sell anything else that can do the same kind of job, both good or evil, they're going to really have to think this through. And so this is just, again, reacting to the public pressure right now. And you've seen that with the Delta, and you've seen that with a variety of other companies that have said, I don't know if we're going to have the same kind of relationship with the NRA. And you've noticed that the opinion polls show that they have all dropped in their approval rating rather dramatically, haven't they?
That's an interesting point, Chelsey. I mean, we're in a free country, and these companies are able to kind of exercise their liberties in such a way that might be able to appease their populace. But again, individuals are making their decisions, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it is, as you mentioned, entirely Dick's prerogative or any other corporation's prerogative to decide if it's their place to get behind a cause, and if so, which ones they want to support. It's definitely a trend we've noticed in the last few years where companies publicly advocate for a public policy issue or stance. But it's also consumers' prerogative where they want to take their business and how they want to respond. In this type of instance, I have to just think that consumers will go elsewhere to buy their guns, but also, some of the things they're putting in place maybe wouldn't have prevented these school shootings to begin with. Really doubling down on making sure people's background checks are followed through. Maybe the age issue would have helped, but a lot of mass shooters are over the age of 21. So I have to think there are other steps we can put into place to really protect schools and students and the public welfare. And that's more of a law enforcement question to me than a corporate question.
Yeah. And so we'd love to hear from you. What do you think about what Dick's Sporting Good is doing? You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. Or you can jump on over to the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and share your comment or question, and we'll announce that over the air as well. Kerby, what I thought was really interesting about this is that I remember Aaron Sorkin. Oh, no, it's not Aaron Sorkin. There was an individual for the New York Times wrote in Deal Book, and he says that Congress is just inability to be able to come to agreement relative to kind of some of the gun control or about measures to be able to stop this. What you're going to continue to see is other entities to be able to utilize their influence in such a way that they might be able to move the political needle their way. So, for example, he highlighted the fact that banks have the opportunity really to stop selling specifically to these, stop allowing their services to be used in the purchasing of guns. That could be the next shoe that drops in particular. And so we're just seeing some creativity in the marketplace right now, I guess you could say.
Again, it's a free market. People can do what they want to do. I did a commentary a while back on which you had some individuals that were involved in selling certain items that were seen as dangerous, whether it was magazines or guns or whatever, and certain banks said, we're just not going to extend credit to you anymore. And so this game is played out in a variety of different venues. One is in the legislature. Another is in the judicial area. Aren't you glad we got Chelsey with us today?
I'm so glad. I haven't watched Law & Order in forever.
But another one is in the area of commerce. And in some cases right now, people that are against the NRA have been able to gin up all sorts of hot positions that have caused some companies, for example, I mentioned Delta, we can mention Enterprise or Dollar or whatever, that have said, okay, we'll no longer have a benefit through NRA to those particular members. But again, there are consequences, as Chelsey just pointed out. The surveys that just came out show that in some cases the unfavorability rating of some of those companies has doubled. Now, to be honest, it's doubled more because of Republicans than Democrats, more because of conservatives than liberals, doubled more because of individuals that are gun owners and not gun owners. But still, there are consequences to business decisions. And so just as in some cases progressives that can't get what they want through the legislature will go to the courts, now they can't get to the legislature, they go into the field of commerce and see if they can pressure some of these companies. And that's what they're doing.
What's fascinating is, according to new data, 66% of consumers find it important for brands to speak out on socio-political issues like gun control. 66%. Relative to millennials, 58% of millennials, 55% of Gen Xers, 51% of baby boomers think it's important that the brands they support invest in causes they care about. There is a greater expectation upon the entities and organizations in our culture, and I want to know what you're going to be doing about it. Are you going to be supporting Dick's? Are you going to boycott Dick's? We'd love to hear from you. You can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212, or you can jump on over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. And I'm going to tell you something. I fully support the Second Amendment, but just to tease it out, there is something in particular that I think is very admirable about what Dick's is doing. And we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was criticized for using a term correctly and in the proper context. When he was speaking to the National Sheriff's Association, he reminded them that the office of sheriff is a crucial part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. The outrage surfaced almost immediately because he used the term Anglo-American. Let me quote from one U.S. Senator. He said, "Do you know anyone who says Anglo-American heritage in a sentence? What could possibly be the purpose of saying that other than to pit Americans against each other? For the chief law enforcement officer to use a dog whistle like that is appalling." It's hard to know what to make of this and many of the other comments on Twitter. Either these people are ignorant of our history, or more likely they jumped on the phrase to score political points against President Trump and Attorney General Sessions. In either case, let me provide a little education. The word sheriff actually is a combination of the word shire and reef. Sheriffs were important both in England, where much of law enforcement developed, and then in the United States. The Attorney General was quite proper in reminding the sheriffs gathered that they were part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. Charles Cook did all of us a service by digging up multiple times when Senator Barack Obama and President Barack Obama talked about the Anglo-American legal system and the foundation of Anglo-American law. These, of course, were never controversial and illustrates that the criticism of Attorney General Sessions was merely trying to score political points. We might also remind these critics that they enjoy so many constitutional rights because of our Anglo-American heritage. That includes the freedom of speech that gives them the freedom to say such stupid things. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts hosting Point of View today. And we've got in studio, we've got Kerby Anderson as well as Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute. And we have been talking about news that just broke earlier this morning that Dick's Sporting Goods has decided that it is getting out of the assault weapons industry, and they have decided to stop selling particular guns. What is it? AK-15?
AR-15s and AK-47s.
AK-47s. And not only that, they're going to require individuals to be 21 years old to be able to purchase guns. There's certain individuals that are saying they're going to boycott Dick's now. Other individuals that are saying that they're supportive of Dick's. And we want to know what you think. You can call in 800-351-1212, or you can jump on over to Point of View Radio, or at facebook.com/Point of View Radio. And we're going to go ahead and jump over to the phone lines right now. We've got Jonathan in Georgia right now. Jonathan, are you there?
Hey, guys. How y'all doing today?
Hey, doing well. Jonathan, how are you?
Doing well, very well.
Hey.
Well, temperature can't decide what it wants to be over here in Georgia.
Very neat. So what's your point of view, Jonathan?
Well, y'all were talking about the Dick's Sporting Goods and their memo that they released. I guess it was earlier this morning. Mm-hmm. And so I'd been doing some reading on it. And while I do admire Dick's in the sense that they have made their own decision because they're a company that's owned by individuals, and they certainly have that right to hold that view and pass that view on throughout their stores. I have no problem with that at all. That's capitalism. If you don't support it, don't buy from them. That's a good market how it works here. And I agree with the individual business decisions, but What I don't agree with is that their little memo that they sent out was kind of giving advice to the general public or politicians some of the things just highlighted were to raise the age limit to purchase weapons to 21. And just for instance, I have a problem with that because, 18-year-olds can go off to war, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the immediate problems there. And also, like, banning high-capacity magazines. I don't think that's necessary because we have had an assault weapons ban in America, and doing some own research of my own, it really doesn't matter because if someone is actually determined to cause havoc and kill people, quite frankly, that's the intent of the human heart, the evilness that's just in there, and no amount of legislation is going to stop that. Also, the assault weapons. I own several guns, several weapons, and while the M16 and the M4 are military weapons, that's what the M stands for in the M16 and the M4. The AR-15 Armalite design number 15, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're very, very different weapons. And quite frankly, just because it looks a certain way, you can carry out the same type of havoc and shooting with any other type of weapon, like a Ruger or any other type of semi-automatic rifle. Same with bump stocks. They're mainly just play toys in the sense of they're not designed for actual wreaking havoc and killing people. It's mainly a toy. You can make a bump stock with your belt. So that's a few of my opinions there.
Oh, well, Jonathan, thank you so much.
He brought a lot to the table.
Yeah,
that was
good.
good. Very good. And again, let's recognize that an AR-15, it was invented by the name of Stormer, and of course it's an Armalite. That's where the A comes from, but it's a lot like an M16 or an M4. And in some respects, let's help our millennial listeners for just a minute, because I was around when they came up with the first assault weapon ban. And it was primarily Senator Dianne Feinstein that said, well, this looks dangerous, so we'll ban those. In other words, those that have a place for a bayonet, or this one has other kinds of features, and we would ban them more by how they looked. And that really didn't make a great deal of sense. And as Jonathan points out, there are some remarkable differences between military, which allows you to fire automatic, in other words, like a machine gun, bum, 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 versus where every time you pull the trigger, it is the case. And what happened during the time in which we had this ban on assault weapons is, number one, then those of you that had a pre-ban AR-15, the price of that doubled, tripled, quadrupled. There were people buying those when they could as investments. It was harder and harder to get the magazine, so if you wanted to get one of those pre-ban magazines, those were more expensive. And when it was all said and done, almost every evaluation that was done concluded that the assault weapons ban did not have an impact. And you don't have to take my opinion for it. You don't have to take the NRA's opinion for it. A while back, the Washington Post, Glenn Kessler, actually looked at all the various gun laws to see if any of those, as currently written, including the assault weapons ban, would have made a difference. And he concluded they would not. So, again, just something to think about while we are in the midst of all sorts of companies wanting to either ban or restrict their sale of AR-15s. And, of course, there's a real push right now because we're going to have a March. Was it March 24th?
March 24th, yeah. And so here, let's give let's give a scope and scale perspective really quickly. We've got 310 million guns in the U.S., according to some estimates. And so that's almost
one person.
That's almost one person. But here's the fascinating thing. 3 in 10 Americans currently own a gun.
Yes.
Only another 11% don't own a gun, but live with someone who does. 66% say they own more than one gun. 29%, and I would say Jonathan probably is one of those with the way that he was talking. 29% say they own 5 or more guns. However, the number of households with a gun has been dropping.
Yes.
In 1977, 54% of households owned a gun. In 2010, 32.3% of households own a gun. So again, what we're seeing is The number of guns owned and purchased is rising. The number of individuals that are actually owning those guns is dropping.
Now, you've been in Tennessee where you've been at least in one home where this guy has a complete arsenal, right?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, he is probably one of the more responsible, patriotic, duty-bound individuals that I know, but I would never get on his property unless properly invited on there.
He's got guns that fill up this room, wouldn't they?
Oh, that is the truth. But, Chelsey, here's what and I'd love to hear your pushback as well as our listeners if I appreciate, to a certain degree, Dick's bold stand. At the end of the day, this is a capitalistic system, and they can do whatever they want. That's fine. Target could do whatever they want. And you know what? I always go back to, I agree very little with Bernie Sanders. And by very little, I mean scant. Barely anything. But the audaciousness and the boldness that he made those stands during the 2016 election, I mean, I completely disagree with him for the vast majority of the things he said, but I love the boldness and audaciousness. It's not like he was trying to sell us a bill of goods. And Dick seems to be doing that right now.
Okay, so we don't often disagree, Nick, but here we go. This one's for the listeners. No, I don't think it's very bold to do when it's popular in the PR realm to make this stand. I think that there's public outcry. There are marches. There's many, many protests across the country. The same with the Me Too movement. It doesn't take a whole lot of boldness for Google to get behind the Me Too movement because it is, and that's a cynic in me. I'm not trying to call them an opportunist. No doubt that they're going to lose money out of this, that there might be some kind of sacrifice to them for this decision. And no doubt that maybe it is an authentic decision on their part. You know, of course, I'm on the side of companies' right to take a stand. Hobby Lobby is a great example of that. Individuals or companies are made up of individuals. That's what the Supreme Court said. Individuals have the right to express financially or verbally, however, whatever causes they want. So the free speech person in me loves that, and that's wonderful. But I don't know that this is a particularly bold and brave stand. I think people just don't care and are going to go buy their guns elsewhere.
I got to mention that on our Facebook Live, here's a question that Chelsey will appreciate. How is it a company can refuse to sell a gun to an 18-year-old, but they also can't say they wouldn't bake a cake for a gay wedding?
A lot of worlds colliding.
It always goes back to the wedding.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that is a totally different animal. But it does come back. What we're really talking about is conscience rights. Now, religious conscience rights are different than, political conscience rights, but both are worthy of protection. Religious conscience rights have been outlined and protected since the beginning of the Constitution. And I even said this last week to a journalist who's playing devil's advocate with me on this topic. And I said, after all, religious adherence, it's the first protected class. And I don't think that is said enough in our nation's dialogue right now, that it is the first protection outlined in the first clause of the First Amendment of our Constitution. So religious conscience rights are truly the original protected class. And for that, they're deserving, and the courts have given them a lot of deference. But, in this instance, it's not necessarily religious belief. It's political beliefs, which are equally deserving of First Amendment protection. But I think in this instance, it makes a statement, not a difference, probably.
Yeah. And that's what I'm really interested in. I'd love to hear from you. 800-351-1212. Do you think, are you going to be supporting Dick's? Are you going to boycott Dick's? I want to know more. And so we will continue to take your phone calls right after this.
Point of View Radio has been changing lives for a generation. Listeners have been inspired to apply themselves in all kinds of ways, to stand up as lawyers defending the Constitution and freedom, to start Christian schools, training up a new generation, to launch ministries on college campuses, even to run for and serve in Congress. So again, what are you doing to make a positive change? One way to start today is to join the Truth Team, Truth Team 360, and help us change lives. Our nation needs a Truth Team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm hosting Point of View, the Millennial Roundtable today. We've got Kerby Anderson here in studio, as well as Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute. And we've been talking about Dick's Sporting Goods' recent announcement just this morning that they are raising the age of that individual. In order to buy a gun, they must be 21, and getting out of the assault weapons industry. And we have been taking some of your phone calls, and we are going to continue taking phone calls. We're going to jump on over to Kay right now. Kay, are you there?
Yes, I am. I was just telling them that we have a wedding to go to, and we were going to rent a car because we're going to make vacation up towards New York, and a bigger car than what we drive. So we will not be renting from the companies that have stood against, have said that they stand against the NRA. I believe any organization has a right to exist. I believe that people have a right to bear arms. It's given to the Constitution. And I'm not going to back a company that does not allow that. Now, if you wanted to get against, where they didn't do their job or something like that, then I would be on your side. But if you're just going to take it away from everybody because one person does something wrong, no, I don't believe that that's the right thing. So even the airline tickets, I'm hoping nobody purchased because there's a bunch of people flying in. Now they got to go back and see if they purchased from that because I have a gun. I don't like guns. But all my kids that like to hunt have guns, and none of them have done anything that they should be penalized for. So I'm not going to back something that penalizes people who've done nothing wrong.
Well, Kay, thank you. Kay, thank you so much for your phone call. What Kay's referring to is that there are certain organizations and companies that have decided to kind of back out of the special discounts that they were giving to NRA members. Specifically, it was usually around 5% discount that they were giving to to NRA members. So it was everyone from Delta and United, the airlines, to Enterprise, which was the car rental place, have decided that they are no longer going to offer that 5% discount to individuals that are NRA members. And, again, this is just another outgrowth of a free market, right, Kerby?
Sure. Now, let me just add one more thing to the discussion, and I'd like to hear from our listeners. We now know that in order to pressure some of these companies, they actually use what are called bots. Now, I don't want to get too technical here, but it creates a sense that there are more people complaining to, let's use Enterprise. Well, we'll pick on them for a minute since we already picked on Delta or Enterprise or Dollar, one of those, that makes sound like there's more people that are actually opposed to them providing an NRA discount. And so as a result, they're reacting not to actual pressure, but manufactured pressure. So that's something to remember, especially
Are they Russian bots?
If all of a sudden you start seeing all sorts of things showing up on your particular web page, if you're another company and you're being pressured, it may be that many people are opposed to what you are doing in your business or company, but it may be that some of that has just been artificially manufactured.
And so to kind of give a scope and scale, New York Times had a great piece this morning on some of those Russian bots that we've become so intimately acquainted with, and just to show the significance and I guess just some of the size of it. An insider within that organization in Russia that tried to influence our elections. There were 4 floors dedicated to these individuals.
Just amazing.
400 people working on these 4 floors that had served in 12-hour shifts. And so to think it's just one guy in his mom's basement that's got operating multiple accounts, that needs to be completely eradicated from your mind. And so there's a level of significance relative to bots. But let's go back to the Dix decision. We're going to continue taking phone calls. We've got Randy in Georgia right now. Randy, are you there?
I am.
Hey, Randy, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
I'm blessed.
Oh, good to hear. What's your point of view, Randy?
I respect Dick's opinion on what guns to sell and whatever age group they want to sell to, but I would think that they should also respect the other retailers and the other people that buys the guns. I don't believe in banning nobody and saying I'm not going to ever go into a Dick's Sporting Goods or not because they have fishing tackle and things like that I like. Mm-hmm. But they have an opinion, but some of us have a different opinion. And I think as Christians, we should respect each other's opinions. And that's just the way I feel about it. I'm a Methodist minister, and I have probably 30, 40 guns, handguns and rifles. And I support NRA, but I do respect Dick's opinion, but they don't need to try to press it on other people.
Well, Well, Randy, thank you so much for your opinion. I'm kind of Randy's camp, even though y'all are making fun of me for it. Like, I respect Dix. I think I think they're like a Bernie bro to a certain extent. They've decided they're going to put out their, and again, here's what we were saying off air. And Chelsey can disagree with me because I really like it when we disagree. It's this idea that at the end of the day, like, Dix isn't going to lose a gun. They'll probably lose a little bit of gun market, but I think they stand to lose a lot more in Nike shorts and individuals that are looking for sport and tackle.
Members of the NRA are not buying their guns at Dix. They're not.
They're going to other places to do that. And so I just appreciate individuals that are boldly standing, or entities that are boldly standing up, whether they're Christian or whether they're sporting good apparel industries, because I just think that that's kind of a beautiful thing, and especially something that Christians should emulate, right? When we look at the biblical narrative, we're reminded of Stephen being so bold. We're reminded of Paul telling the church at Galatia to boldly proclaim the gospel message. Like, there's a certain boldness in just standing for our opinions, and we've been given the opportunity here in the U.S. to use the liberties that have been inalienable given to us in order to voice that. And so I appreciate it, Chelsey.
I'm glad you do. I'm so glad you do.
I just really like it. I don't agree with it, but I really like it, though.
Randy said something, and since you two disagree slightly, but you do respect each other's opinions. But what is hurting the whole debate right now is one side is saying, well, the NRA is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, that's no good.
That you do not love kids. How many times have we heard that phrase? And that's not respecting each other's opinions. I'm all for a civil discussion, and anybody that says, well, what are you doing about it? Well, for example, my commentaries both on Monday and Tuesday talked about various common sense things, mostly through the instant criminal background check, but a few other things as well through restraining orders, some things that might make a difference. But we can't have a civil debate when the other side, sometimes the side that disagrees with Randy, does not respect his opinion, because I hear him say, I may disagree with what Dix is doing, but that's fine. I respect their opinion. I just want them to respect mine. But that's not always happening, is it?
I am a huge fan of Randy now, and may his tribe increase. And so let's keep on going to the phone calls. We've got Joe in North Carolina right now. Joe, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Joe, what's your point of view?
In all honesty, let's start off by, let's just look at the name of Jesus. That's the first thing we should do. Let's look at the name of our Lord and be grateful and thankful for that. All right, now that his part's done, now we can do our part in reality and with all common sense. How do we know that Dicks aren't going to actually do better with gun sales? Because you're going to have people say, well, they're doing this, so let's go buy from them. So it can work both ways. So it all comes down to common sense. That everything that you see happening lines up with the Word in the last days will be a great falling away. You're not stopping anything. You can be proactive in our schools with the metal detectors and the training. It's sad that our kindergartnens now need to be taught and trained, just like you were trained not to talk to strangers. Now you're trained in school what to do when you hear the gunshots. And that's something we should do, right? It's the world we live in. Those things aren't necessarily going to change. And like Randy said about respecting their opinions. And then you guys mentioned that people don't want to make the cakes. Well, if the Bible's true and if every word of God is true, and Paul was able to pray over napkins and send them across the country, and people were saved and filled with the Holy Spirit, and if he's no respecter of person, if he's the same today, yesterday, and forever, then why can't we take all these opportunities to pray for individuals, to pray a supernatural anointing on that cake and sell it to them, and when they take their first bite and all their friends take their bite, that the Holy Spirit jumps on them. I mean, why can't we why can't what we're doing line up with God's Word?
Yeah.
If he's no respecter of person, if we could pray over that cake and say, Lord, please, in the name of Jesus, if our heart's right, and we cry out to the living God and pray for a special anointing, and when each person took a bite of that cake, or each person stood up to that wedding, that the Holy Spirit would have access, and that God would open their heart and give an utterance so they might come to know Jesus as Lord and Savior. And be raised to be mighty witnesses and soldiers for the uplifting of his kingdom, opposed to just simply, backbiting one another and this and that.
Yeah, Joe, you bring up a great point that I've been thinking about. Like, we have not because we ask not, right? In James 4:2, it's this understanding that, like, we have been given access to be able to the throne room of God. We can boldly approach it. It says in Hebrews 4:16, and not only can we boldly approach this throne room of grace because of what's been done, we also get inside this throne room that literally says in Proverbs 15:8 that he delights to hear from our prayers. So we can boldly approach this throne room. We've got somebody that delights to hear our prayers and that wants to be able to do and work ways that we can't even imagine or think about, it says in Ephesians 3:20. And what a beautiful opportunity, because at the end of the day, who knows whether it's a cake or whether it's a gun? At the end of the day, it's always kindness that leads to repentance. So how can we be kind to individuals in order that they might turn to the Father of all lights? And so may your tribe increase, Joe. And so we are going to be right back after this, but we're going to continue talking about Dick's Sporting Goods and their recent decision. And we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. We recently noted the decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit approving the invocations presented by the commissioners of Jackson County, Michigan, before their meetings. Today, I wanted you to hear the judges in their own words. Judge Griffin, writing the opinion for the Sixth Circuit, explained, quote, "There is no support for the plaintiff's granular view of legislative prayer." He said that the prayers reflect the individual commissioner's religious beliefs does not mean the Jackson County Board of Commissioners is endorsing a particular religion, Christianity or otherwise. Judge Sutton, concurring, wrote, quote, "Good manners might have something to say about all of this and how it is done. So too might the Golden Rule. But the United States Constitution does not tell federal judges to hover over each town hall meeting in the country like a helicopter parent, scolding, revising, okaying the content of this legislative prayer or that one," unquote. Dissenting, Judge Moore wrote that the Supreme Court has approved only the, quote, "right to open its meetings with solemn and respectful prayers, which was targeted at legislators and offered by clergy or volunteers from a variety of faith traditions, but not the practice of government officials themselves asking the public to participate in exclusively Christian prayer." Well, that's what they think about it. Now the question is, what does the Supreme Court think? To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View, and I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Kerby Anderson, our honorary millennial, and Chelsey Youman, who is an actual millennial. And
a lawyer. So we got to talk about the Fourth Circuit Court, right?
We're going to get to this. We're going to get.
I keep asking on every break. I say, the Fourth Circuit case.
Yeah, we're going to get to
That's the second article. So
no one else is excited about
article?
it.
The people want to talk about Dick's Sporting Goods. Okay. Let's give the people what they want, Chelsey.
I'll just slip in legalese in between the calls.
Good job.
Okay, we're going to jump on over to South Carolina. We've got Ralph on the line. Ralph, are you there?
I certainly am. Good morning. Afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ralph. What is your point of view, my friend?
There's a few things I'd like to bring up, if I may be so bold. First of all, they talked about the clip capacities to eliminate those or drop them down to a certain number.
Yeah.
Well, California has a law against that.
Yeah, 10.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And did that stop?
No.
The people in California? No. I'm from Connecticut originally, and I was there when they had this school shooting, which was a disaster. I mean, that was just so heartbreaking. But people have to realize that, guns. It's not the guns. The kid who did that was mentally unstable. His mother was going to have him institutionalized. What we have to do in this country is that the stupid, liberals and progressives, they're a bunch of morons. They think they're doing the right thing and they're doing the wrong thing. Is when doctors have patients like this, they have to be able to report this to the authorities. The HIPAA laws are ludicrous. They are really ludicrous, and it prevents things like this from being stopped. If this kid had been reported to the authorities, very possible they could have gone over to his home and had a long talk with his mother, because his mother was the first one he shot, and his mother was the ones who bought the guns. And explained to his mother, look, this kid cannot be allowed to have these weapons because of his mental capacity. But they don't do that. And even another, just a little sidebar, I was an EMT. And when we went on a call, if somebody had AIDS or was AIDS positive, they didn't have to tell us. That was their secret. And so we went in, and, they tell you you've got to have your personal protective equipment, and that's absolutely right. But if you know that someone is HIV positive or has AIDS, you're going to be so much more careful. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
Ralph, let me add something, because since you lived in Connecticut,
Sure.
you know the story. After Sandy Hook in 2012, Dick's Sporting Goods said that they were not going to sell assault-style weapons. A year later, they went back to selling them again. So this is actually the second time. And so you might remember that, having lived in Connecticut, which, of course, is where Sandy Hook took place. So this is the second time they've pulled the so-called assault weapons, and yet they come back again sometimes because of market pressure.
I will clarify
What
that.
do you have to say about that,
I will
Nick?
clarify that. So they stopped selling it, and then they started selling it at a subsidiary that they have,
Yes,
Field
right.
and Stream. So
There you
they're
go,
still
Field and
not,
Stream.
They're still not selling. It's kind of like, and I had a bad experience at Golf Galaxy, and Golf Galaxy is a part of Dick's, but I still go to Dick's. I just don't go to Golf Galaxy. But nevertheless, Field and Stream started selling it.
That's
but
right.
Dick's did not start selling it. But here's what I think is a very interesting point, though, that I'd like to push back on a little bit on Ralph, though. And again, I understand that mental health issues are significant and they need to be addressed in this issue. But again, this is more than just a liberal kind of progressive thing, because the Trump budget cut $425 million out of mental health spending. And so we have to, if this is going to be a mental health issue, and again, not all individuals that suffer from mental health incapacities are shooters, but we do need to see that if we're going to continue to point towards mental health issues, we need to at least consider ways that not only the government can fund, but also other entities can be freed up to be able to fund.
I would be interesting to see what the statistics have to say about the mental health question, because I know we keep coming back to that. No doubt that is a part of this equation, but it almost feels like finding a needle in the haystack. Like, how are you going to know out of these, how many thousands, 100,000 people that have depression, these specific ones are in a place where we can identify them ahead of time and prevent them from being an active shooter? In my mind, I continue to think that this is a law enforcement problem, and we can take all the guns off of all the shelves, off of all the stores in America. They're going to find guns through the black market, through Craigslist. I mean, there are going to be other ways these people can get a hold of guns. This comes down to basic facts that the FBI knew about this shooter, this 19-year-old. The police had been to his house, 39, 49 times?
Yeah, something ridiculous.
Yes, there were red flags ahead of time. So there really needs to be preventative mechanisms aside from gun control. I want to see, loaded guards at schools, and not in a way that terrifies or traumatizes kids, but in a way that's going to protect them.
And you better than Chelsey, you would know this. You cannot charge someone with a crime they did not commit, or they were thinking about committing.
You have to have probable cause to search and seize anything in their homes. I mean, aside from the mental health issue, which, yes, is the root cause of a lot of this, we've got to have some law enforcement mechanisms in place.
Yeah, and then we go back to what happened just specifically at this instance in Parkland almost 2 weeks ago now. It's hard to believe that's already been 2 weeks, that you have instances where upwards of almost 40 times that the mother or family or other individuals that called to police officers, but yet that still moved forward. The police, the family even reached out to the FBI. The FBI didn't do anything. threats were made by the shooter over social media that he was actually going to do this. They didn't do anything. And then upwards of 5 deputies, one SRO officer, 4 other deputies waited outside the building upwards of 4 minutes, did not do anything. Kerby, this is a law enforcement issue to a certain degree, and it's realized the gun thing is just one part of the piece.
What are your thoughts about the sheriff?
Oh, my goodness. Get out of here.
What about the sheriff?
Go sell life insurance, man. Come on. Oh, my goodness. Accept
You've done
responsibility.
an outstanding job of leading this department. It was what you were saying. Even Jake Taver going, really? Did I just hear you say that on live television? Yes.
Accept responsibility. There was breakdowns in your department, multiple breakdowns over multiple years, and yet you were still touting that this is you're operating optimally. If this is optimal, then you need to go sell life insurance. At the end of it, you need to go do something else other than law enforcement in Broward County. And so, nevertheless, you're going to get me all riled up, Kerby.
I always did. I did this Monday with him. It was so much fun to see him getting all excited.
Let's continue going to the phone lines. We got Frank in New Mexico. Frank, are you there?
Yeah, hang on a sec. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I wanted to get to the reality of this. What we need to do is keep these maniacs out of our schools, and I think we ought to regulate our ammo. Guns are good, but they ain't no good without ammo. And second of all, I think we should get our state governments to get our police force, pay them overtime if they have to stand by our schools. And one more thing I want to say is we need to ID our kids. We need to get photo IDs of all the kids, shut down the schools, and not let them in without a valid ID. And once that kid drops out or whatever, omit that ID. We got to keep the maniacs out of the schools. Gun laws are good, but I mean, in this case, it ain't going to help. If we don't keep these people out of the schools, we're doing no good, you know. And if we can keep tabs on the ammo, that might help also.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to let you guys know that we got to keep them out of the schools.
That sounds like it's getting into a Second Amendment question to me. I don't know about you.
There it is. But it is right. It kind of alludes to what you were just referring to. There needs to be more armed individuals at these schools to protect these kids, right? I mean, I think about from the bank perspective, we have so many guards at banks right now just to protect our money. How much more valuable is our children? And so and there was an individual last week that gave the idea of potentially veterans. And so why not employ veterans that are unemployed right now to guard the schools?
Even voluntarily.
Even voluntarily, exactly. Not only would they guard, but they'd also be good role models and examples. And so we're going to have to take one of those breaks, but when we come back, we're going to continue on the topic of the Second Amendment as well as a variety of other issues. Hope you'll join us right back.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because
of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts. And welcome to Point of View on this February 28, 2018 day. I am Nick Pitts, your host for Point of View, joined in the Millennial Roundtable by Kerby Anderson, as well as Chelsey Youman from the First Liberty Institute. During the first hour, we were talking about Dick's Sporting Goods and their recent announcement that announcing immediately they will stop selling the AK-47s as well as the AR-15s in their stores, as well as raising the age that an individual can purchase a gun to 21 years old in response to the Parkland shooting that happened 2 weeks ago. And they kind of felt a sense of responsibility, one, relative to corporate social responsibility that so many companies are feeling right now, as well as two, one of the shooter actually purchased one of his guns at Dick's Sporting Goods. And so in response, Dick's is getting out of the shooting, or I guess out of the automatic assault rifle business. But as Kerby illuminated during the first hour, this is not the first time that they've done that. Going back to 2012 during the Newtown, Connecticut shooting, they decided to pull out of that particular market, but then entered back into it through a subsidiary known as Field and Stream, now to come back out of it again. And we have been taking some of your phone calls, to say the very least. So if you're getting a busy signal right now, that's because all the phones are being occupied right now.
People need to talk.
People need to talk. And so if you missed during the first hour, you can go back on Facebook.com/PointOfViewRadio. Chelsey disagreed with me adamantly multiple times
You're welcome.
during that first hour, and I'm sure she will continue to disagree with me. But that's the beauty of radio. And so what Montaigne said, there's nothing more boring than a conversation in which everyone agrees. And so we are going to continue taking phone calls during the second hour as well. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Once a phone call drops off, then you can jump back on there. And so 800-351-1212, or you can jump on over to the Facebook page, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and you can leave a comment or message on there, specifically on the video. So there's a live video that's going on right now. Just drop a little line in the comment section on the live video. You'll be able to see that because you'll see me and you'll be repulsed, but then you'll have to get it back up and then decide to go and post a message. But nevertheless, we're going to continue taking phone calls right now. We've got Chad in Georgia right now that's joining us on the line. Chad, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, Chad, what is your point of view?
I think that the Dick's Sporting Good people are, this is a tragedy by no means. I mean, there ain't no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're just trying to capitalize on it and make money by selling a lot of the other stuff to people that normally wouldn't visit Dick's, because, for whatever reason they'd have. And, oh, well, they're not selling assault weapons now. We'll go and buy stuff from their store,
Mm-hmm.
And I own several guns. I've been to Dick's Sporting Goods. I've never bought a gun from Dick's Sporting Goods.
That was my point, Chad.
I look, people that want to buy those kind of weapons, they're not going to go to Dick's to buy them anyways, because Dick's is high. There ain't no doubt about it. I've looked at several gun stores and they're high.
Mm-hmm.
Even when they're on sale, they're high. I tried to look up what their annual gun sales were. I couldn't find it. And I would be surprised if their annual gun sales on assault weapons is very much anyway. So if they can cut this out and sell more Nike stuff or Under Armour stuff or baseball gloves, I think that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, Chad, I am of your mind as well. I tried to look it up online, but I couldn't find anything relative to their, just kind of the general numbers of revenue of how much they bring in a year. A large part of that stemmed from a kind of an incident at Golf Galaxy, but that's beside the point, and that's more frustrating in nature, so I won't go down that line. But nevertheless, Dick's Sporting Goods does not have how much they, and again, I'm of that mind that I am similar to you. I don't think they sell a lot of guns, but I think they are getting into this space in order that they might be able to prop up some of their sales in Nike shorts or in Under Armour shirts or in some shoes. And I mean, it's going to kind of go the way of Target. It's going to kind of go the way of Home Depot. We'll see. They've entered into the culture wars, and we're going to get to see if they're actually going to succeed. Right, Chelsey?
That's right. Consumers get to decide at this point. But maybe we needed them to be selling these guns as red flags because people buying guns at Dick's might not be avid hunters, you know?
Mm-hmm. And so it really does. It provides an opportunity. One, again, I disagree relative to their particular stance, but I am so encouraged, and I just admire their ability just to take the courageous stand. Because, I mean, if I was a betting man, because I'm not, because it's against the law and blah, I think that I think it would be very detrimental for them. I think it's going to be very detrimental for their sales. But who knows? Who knows, Kerby?
Well, let me pick up on that because, one of the frustrations that we've had right now in the so-called gun debate is people really aren't honest about what they want to intend. And in this particular case, you are lauding the fact that it is kind of amazing that we can find a politician like Bernie Sanders that tells you really what he thinks.
Yeah.
Donald Trump sort of did that. But a lot of these people say, well, we want common sense gun control regulations. Okay, what does that mean? Those are just words, but what does that mean? Do you want to change the instant background check? Do you want to ban assault weapons? There's a bill before Congress. One of our people here reminds us that there's a bill right now that is called the assault weapons ban that's before Congress. Would you plan on voting for that? We get a lot of euphemisms, a lot of platitudes, a lot of cliches. I really appreciate people honestly telling us where they stand on some of these issues.
That's so good. It's so good. We're going to keep on going to the phone lines. We got Tom in South Carolina right now. Tom, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, Tom, what's your point of view?
Oh, well, a few years ago, I think it was, Walmart decided to pull out of selling the evil black assault rifles.
Yep.
But they never quit selling the ammunition to feed them. So whatever their reason for not selling the guns, it's going to be hard to get people to believe that when you're still selling ammunition for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish somebody would furnish a clear, honest definition of an assault rifle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
In its day, the British Brown Bess musket was an assault rifle. So that's assault rifle is nothing really. But anyway, and a lot of people don't know it, but Lee Harvey Oswald bought his rifle that he assassinated President Kennedy with. I believe it was from Klein's department stores. And shortly thereafter, Klein revised their policy. I think it was one, they quit selling mail order, but Dick's it's nothing new. I'm not going to boycott them. I don't do business with them anyway because there's not any within same driving distance, and they don't sell the type of guns I collect. I collect vintage and antique guns, so I do have some modern stuff. I have some AR-15s, but I buy the parts and assemble them myself.
Well, thank you so much for your phone call, Tom. And again, this just illuminates something that's very interesting. What we've continued to see is that individuals are expecting more of their companies. And really, this idea of corporate social responsibility continues to be heightened in 2018. Again, just to share some of those numbers, 58% of millennials, 55% of Gen Xers, and 51% of baby boomers think it's important that brands they support invest in causes they care about. 66% of consumers find it important for brands to speak out on socio-political issues. And we are going to continue taking your phone calls as well as some of your comments. Facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Leave a comment or question on the live video or 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. And we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was criticized for using a term correctly and in the proper context. When he was speaking to the National Sheriff's Association, he reminded them that the office of sheriff is a crucial part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. The outrage surfaced almost immediately because he used the term Anglo-American. Let me quote from one U.S. Senator. He said, "Do you know anyone who says Anglo-American heritage in a sentence? What could possibly be the purpose of saying that other than to pit Americans against each other? For the chief law enforcement officer to use a dog whistle like that is appalling." It's hard to know what to make of this and many of the other comments on Twitter. Either these people are ignorant of our history, or more likely they jumped on the phrase to score political points against President Trump and Attorney General Sessions. In either case, let me provide a little education. The word sheriff actually is a combination of the word shire and reef. Sheriffs were important both in England, where much of law enforcement developed, and then in the United States. The Attorney General was quite proper in reminding the sheriffs gathered that they were part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. Charles Cook did all of us a service by digging up multiple times when Senator Barack Obama and President Barack Obama talked about the Anglo-American legal system and the foundation of Anglo-American law. These, of course, were never controversial and illustrates that the criticism of Attorney General Sessions was merely trying to score political points. We might also remind these critics that they enjoy so many constitutional rights because of our Anglo-American heritage. That includes the freedom of speech that gives them the freedom to say such stupid things. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable today by Kerby Anderson and Chelsey Youman of the First Liberty Institute. We've been taking your phone calls over Dick's decision to get out of the assault weapon business and raising the age of an individual that can purchase a gun at Dick's to 21 years of age. And so we've been taking your phone calls as well as been going to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio, and sharing some of your messages over air today. And we're going to continue taking some phone calls. We got Beth in South Carolina. Beth, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hey, Beth.
I just wanted to say, hi. I wanted to say that I respect Dick for the stand that they've made. That the last shootings took place, major shootings took place, 2 weeks ago over, and no one has really made a stand. It's almost as if the children's lives don't matter. And I just think they've made a stand saying that their lives do matter. And so I totally respect them for that. I don't own a gun, but my son and my grandsons are avid hunters. I've always believed in the right to bear arms. The reason that the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, was written was to protect against our government. And as my son-in-law, not my son, my son-in-law and daughter who do not own guns, but they have a teenage daughter, pointed out to me that if the government ever comes against the people of this country, it won't be with guns. It will be through, the internet. We'll be controlled that way. So I immediately thought, okay, that makes the point. We don't need these assault rifles. We really do not need assault rifles. But I do want the right to keep a gun in my home to protect myself from the addict or the burglar that comes in. Anyway, so, I admire Dick, and I believe they have just the great right to do that, just as much as as Hobby Lobby has a right to do what they want to do, and any of the other Chick-fil-A. I mean, they all have a right to do what they, as a company, want to do, and we should let it. To me, it's not a big deal. I'm just proud of them. Like I was proud of Chick-fil-A when they take their stand, Hobby Lobby when they take theirs. So that's me today.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for your comment. And as you know, as if you've been listening for the past hour, I am of your mind. I respect them for the stance that they take. I think it's going to come at a cost for them. I am a huge advocate for the Second Amendment, but I just think that something could be done. Who knows if this will amount to anything? But again, we see individuals and entities continuing to take stands. I respect Chick-fil-A very much for the stand that they took. I don't like Chick-fil-A because on Sundays I always want Chick-fil-A and they're closed. And so
I thought you were going to have another argument with Chelsey.
Another disagreement, Chelsey?
Much more passionate disagreement.
You don't like Chick-fil-A? What?
I think I audibly gasped. I'm sorry.
This is so fun to watch this play out today.
So I love the fact that Chick-fil-A takes their stand, even though on Sundays I really wish they wouldn't take their stand, or at least open up a little mini stand in my house. But nevertheless, we just have an opportunity in a free market economy for individuals and entities to be able to kind of serve the business and offer their products in a way that might be conducive towards their conscience as well as towards what they see fit relative to their customers. And so we've been talking about the rights of companies, but there's also the right to bear arms that Beth alluded to. And there's an interesting case right now that's playing out in Maryland right now, Chelsey, that kind of alludes to this, right? Kind of deals with this.
Right. There's a case that came out of the Fourth Circuit, and not to lose you guys in the legalese, bear with me, but it was an en banc decision. En banc means the entire panel of the court ruled on it, which means a higher level. It's a much more powerful decision than when 3 judges rule. This was significantly more. 10 judges on the panel ruled that assault rifles are not protected by the Second Amendment. It's the first decision of its kind ever, and I think it'll go up to the Supreme Court and likely be overruled, because the Supreme Court ruled a few years ago in D.C. versus Heller that any weapon that's commonly used and used for legal purposes are protected by the Second Amendment. Well, there are between 5 and 10 million assault rifles in circulation in the U.S. today, so they're definitely commonly used. Mostly for legal purposes. This Fourth Amendment opinion latched on to some exemption the Supreme Court said in Heller, where the Supreme Court said military weapons might not be as protected. Well, military weapons might include things like grenades, not commonly used weapons that everyone in a household has. And I think that the Supreme Court ruled this, and they really went in extensively into the history of the Second Amendment. And I think it's very enlightening for everyone to go look up this opinion and read why the Second Amendment was adopted. And it's predominantly for the right to protect what they call your hearth and home. I don't know why you need to protect your hearth, but the concept that every single American has the right with force to defensively protect their home. And in the state of Texas, that castle law even applies to your car and workplace. So humans have the right to protect themselves from other humans, from the state, the government, as our previous caller just mentioned. And that was traditionally done through state militias. So this concept that we as citizens no longer need to be armed because we have a national military that's so powerful we can't ever stand up to them. That's not really a concept that holds water, according to the Supreme Court.
That's fascinating. Okay, so for our listeners, one more time, that assault weapons could potentially be banned.
45 in Maryland, and 45 are banned. Yeah,
in Maryland.
And the Fourth Circuit held that that's the case. So that's probably going to be appealed to the Supreme Court, but it's the First Circuit to ever hold that.
Wow, that is significant.
Let me pretend to disagree with Chelsey, because I don't disagree with her, and I wouldn't be stupid enough to do so. But what do the liberals say on this? Because some people might say, well, she just said the Heller decision prevents this. So how is that the case? So for just a minute, we'll argue what the liberals will say. Jeffrey Tobin and others have said, if you look at the Heller decision that came down by the Supreme Court, it prevents the government from banning handguns, but it still leaves open the possibility that you could ban rifles. And since a rifle could be considered a military weapon, that's the arguments being used. Now, it gets back to a key word. You looked at the decision, Chelsey. At one point, they talk about these being weapons of war, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the way the game is played right now by our liberal friends. They say, well, this is an assault weapon. It's a weapon of war. It's used by the military. The Supreme Court never said you couldn't ban rifles, and so that's where that particular decision's coming down. But again, once it goes from the Fourth Circuit Court, don't you think it's going to have to go back to the Supreme Court?
Well, it absolutely will go back to the Supreme Court. And I would respond to that it is not a court or judge's place. It's not the judiciary's place to define these terms. That's the legislature's place. And this is where we get into what, in my line of work, we often call the activist court, the courts that start making law and defining terms that the legislature has yet to define. And so I do think this goes back to Congress. Congress needs to make these decisions. And then it's the court's responsibility to decide what is and is not constitutional, not to define what's a militarized enough weapon.
And that's why a person like Neil Gorsuch on the court, looking back at the original intent of the Second Amendment, is going to come to a very different kind of decision than the four individuals that were appointed either by Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. And so that's why that's a very important. Elections have consequences, don't they?
Gore, such a time as this. Gore, such a time as this.
Oh, my. Y'all don't know this about me, but I don't appreciate puns as much as others at this table.
Well, that's so great. So we'll take one quick phone call before we move off for a commercial break. We've got Larry in Georgia. Larry, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Larry, what's your point of view?
Well, my point of view is that I'm trying to say as much as I can in a few minutes, but isn't it a fact that we already have a law against murder? I mean, that is a law, and I don't understand why that people keep skirting around the fact that we're not enforcing a law, but we're trying to pass laws against the weapons of choice murderers, and it seems as though that it's the same group that wants to make everything legal and get away from the law and become, as far back as you want to read it in the Old Testament of the Bible or even in our history books, that when you don't have a law, you have these things happen. They have people that kill people. A man in China not too long ago went into a school with a knife and killed several children. Mm. And I think the most a classic statement was made by Archie Bunker on All in the Family when they asked him, the daughter said, "Did you realize that so-and-so many people were killed with handguns?" And he said, "Would it make you feel any better if they shoved them out of windows?" I mean, that seems to me as being an issue that we have lived with for years now, that people have a pet desire to stop the sale of handguns or rifles, or they call them assault weapons. The truth is that that they're all just weapons, whether it's a knife or a car or a truck or a car bomb or whatever.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Larry. That there is a sense that the human heart is evil, and we want to do everything that we can to be able to protect that and also to promote the good. But what can we do? And so we will continue to talk about that when we come back right after this.
Point of View turned life right side up for Emily's children. Emily listens in Illinois. She and her husband blissfully sent their children off each day to what she called our small, quaint public school, until Point of View led them to watch the documentary Indoctrination. She said, "We came to realize the need for us to educate our children at home. We want their education to be built on the solid foundation of Scripture." Emily said that would not have happened were it not for Point of View's bold consistency of shining light on public education. Your support for Point of View changes the future for children like Emily's. It leads people to start schools and ministries and businesses that change lives. How has the Truth Team impacted you? Please invest to bring truth to other families like Emily's. Support Truth today. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back on Point of View. I am Nick Pitts, and I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable today by Kerby Anderson and Chelsey Youman, and we have been talking about Dick's Sporting Goods and their recent announcement that they are getting out of the assault weapons business, finally for good, potentially. But if the history repeats itself, they'll be starting up another little subsidiary to sell it. But nevertheless, we won't go there. The cynical part of me won't go there.
That might happen.
So they announced early this morning that they are going to get out of that business and raise the age that an individual that can purchase a gun at Dick's Sporting Goods to 21 years of age. And so we have been taking some of your phone calls and asking, do you support Dick's? Are you going to boycott Dick's? Or do you even live near a Dick's? Maybe is probably the better question for some. So we're going to continue taking phone calls right now. And so we've got Ray on the phone right now. Ray, are you there?
Yeah.
Hey, Ray. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. How are you?
I can't complain. Wouldn't do any better. So, Ray, tell us what your point of view is.
Well, the situation with Dick's, I'm like you. The free enterprise system, that's what makes it work, and that's what makes a business live or die, and that's great that they want to do that, and if that's what they stand. But this whole gun situation, and it's not really with even just the gun situation, has gotten out of control because we've gotten so far away from our Constitution, and you guys just started to touch on it there just before the last break. If we would go back to operating like our forefathers intended for us to operate in our Constitution, they believed in a very small federal government. And this situation is really a local and state matter. The law enforcement broke down in this particular situation, and there's some issues there that need to be dealt with. But the only subject in this conversation that everybody seems to be having that should be in the federal level is our right to bear arms. And that's already been settled. So the rest of it, if the federal government wasn't controlling the strings, we wouldn't have corporate America trying to twist Big Brother's arm to get their way. We wouldn't even be having any of these issues.
Well, Ray said it. I mean, you can't hear me, but I'm applauding you right now. Right? I think you're absolutely right. It's up to the states to determine some of the more refined details of gun control law. But overall, the Second Amendment rights, it goes, you have to look at history to really understand in context what that right is and is not. And you just can't shut out the ability of people to defend themselves.
Yep. And so we're going to jump on over to South Carolina right now. We've got Clint in South Carolina. Are you there?
Yes.
Hey, Clint, what's your point of view?
Like I said earlier, it is free enterprise. Dick's has the right to sell or not sell. I'm not particularly fond of Dick's myself. We have one close, but I very seldom shop at them. The thing is, this is not about assault weapons. It's about control. And our forefathers had enough foresight to see that at some point in time we would have a government that would try to enslave our people just like they did in Europe. And the whole issue of right to bear arms was to protect yourself from an oppressive government, not criminals and this and that and the other, because they didn't really have a big crime problem when the Constitution was written. But, like I say, Dick's can choose not to sell firearms. They can do like Kmart. Kmart caved to the left and to Rosie O'Donnell. They quit selling firearms and ammunition. It worked real well for them. And we as American citizens need to realize that our voice, we are the government. These guys in Washington are not the government. They're our representatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, Clint, one of the most fascinating things, and I'm going to have Chelsey, if I'm wrong, you can just call me out, because I know that you're a little hesitant to do that today. I think one of the fascinating things is we continue to hear about the Constitution and about the founding of our country. I'm a word picture type of guy, and so one of the interesting things about the American experiment that differentiated it from any other government, as far as I can read, is this understanding that there used to be a day that the primary way that government was expressed is that you had an island and then you had an ocean that surrounded that island, and individuals were that island, and then the government was the ocean that surrounded it. That there was limits on that, and government was the one that empowered you and allowed you to be able to stay on that island. What's so radically different from the American experiment, it says that the government is the island and you yourself are the ocean. You have freedoms, you have capacities that are inalienably put within you by your creator for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it allows you the opportunity, one, to be able to move in such a way that you might find prosperity, and then two, not just to continue to cling to rights, but also ask the question, what is your duty? I think that's one of the interesting things that we're going to continue to come up against is as these tragedies continue to happen. Yes, the government needs to step in, but not only does the government need to step in to a certain degree, we need to ask ourselves, what can we be doing specifically because of the liberties that we've been given in order to try to be a part of the solution and not necessarily to identify the problem? What's the churches? Because the churches have this freedom of religion that we continue to go back to. The churches have an opportunity here to be able to be that voice, to be able to lend support towards these mentally ill individuals and come alongside them. The churches have the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus to these individuals that are lonely and that are feeling depressed right now, to be able to be the voice of God that says that you don't walk through a valley of shadow and death alone, for I'm your staff, I'm in your right hand. There's so much opportunity here in the U.S. of A. for individuals not only to understand that government is this limited entity, but also you have liberty to be able to utilize it in such a way that brings about the flourishment of our country and probably for the joy of your soul.
I think that's so well put. I actually attended a conference, and one of the panels on the conference, they had a high level NSA official, and then the equivalent of the NSA official out of Germany and England. And they were talking about some of our cultural differences internationally, our views towards government and privacy rights and all of that. And it was so fascinating. It was one of my favorite panels I've ever witnessed, because the British and the Germans were saying that we don't have an innate sense of distrust for our government. We actually trust the government over corporations to take care of us, and we therefore defer to them and are more inclined to give away our rights and not just allow the government to have a much stronger voice and power. And of course, the American NSA guy said it's the exact opposite here. People don't trust their government, and they trust corporations more. And it's just such a different culture that I think it's worth noting here how this is going to play out is that, the gun culture in America is as strong as it is because people do not want to give their rights away to the government. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, they feel safest when their fate is in their own hands to some extent.
That's good. That's good. Let's continue going to the phone calls. We've got Kat right now. Kat, are you there? Hey, Kat, are you there?
Hello?
Hey, Kat, are you there?
Hi. Sorry. You're the kids. I was calling in. I wanted to make 3 points, if you don't mind. There was that had called in, and I just wanted to mention that there was someone who called in about photo IDs, and being a parent, I wouldn't want my children the photos put up into a computer system, given all that's going on nowadays and all the corruption we're seeing. And the second thing is when people are talking about taking the weapons away, that was already tried in Rwanda, and they convinced everybody to burn all their guns and destroy them, and then they killed millions of people with machetes. So that is the solution. The third thing is I feel like this mental illness thing is being thrown around very loosely. I think it's dangerous. If you take a look at what they're doing to President Trump right now and how they're trying to tag him as being mentally ill, it's very, very dangerous, and it can cause a lot of damage and abuse, especially if you look at all the corruption that's going on at the government level and how that can kind of bleed over into the professional areas and civilian community when it comes to throwing tags of mental illness at people. So I just want to bring that up.
Yeah, Kat, thank you so much. You do bring up two really good points, especially the photo ID thing. I was a little hesitant when I threw that out there, when a caller threw that out there, just because the government's kind of having problems right now protecting certain areas of our privacy. I don't know if I want to give them more information. I'm sure they could get a picture of me. I mean, I'm on Facebook right now on live. I'm sure it's very easy for them to get a picture, but to voluntarily hand over a picture might cause a little bit of concern, right, Chelsey?
Oh, right. As the sole reason that my household has identity theft protection. I don't think that it's a good idea, especially with thinking of my son and honestly, human trafficking at an all-time high in the United States. We don't need a database of children. In fact, I heard this last week, that law enforcement doesn't even put victims of human trafficking in a centralized database for that reason. You don't want to give perpetrators or hackers the ability to identify them that way.
That's so good. And so we are going to have to take one of those breaks again. And so when we come back, we'll continue to take some of your phone calls. There's still a call. Never mind. I was going to say if there's a caller out there, we have an open line, but we don't anymore. And so you can call in and wait, or if you kind of get breakthrough, 800-351-1212. Or try out Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Leave your comment or question in the live video feed box, and we'll be sure to mention that over air. And we'll be talking about that and all more when we get back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. We recently noted the decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit approving the invocations presented by the commissioners of Jackson County, Michigan, before their meetings. Today, I wanted you to hear the judges in their own words. Judge Griffin, writing the opinion for the Sixth Circuit, explained, quote, "There is no support for the plaintiff's granular view of legislative prayer." He said that the prayers reflect the individual commissioner's religious beliefs does not mean the Jackson County Board of Commissioners is endorsing a particular religion, Christianity or otherwise. Judge Sutton, concurring, wrote, quote, "Good manners might have something to say about all of this and how it is done. So too might the Golden Rule. But the United States Constitution does not tell federal judges to hover over each town hall meeting in the country like a helicopter parent, scolding, revising, okaying the content of this legislative prayer or that one," unquote. Dissenting, Judge Moore wrote that the Supreme Court has approved only the, quote, "right to open its meetings with solemn and respectful prayers, which was targeted at legislators and offered by clergy or volunteers from a variety of faith traditions, but not the practice of government officials themselves asking the public to participate in exclusively Christian prayer." Well, that's what they think about it. Now the question is, what does the Supreme Court think? To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And we are back on Point of View for this last 9 minutes. I am Nick Pitts. I'm joined by Kerby Anderson and Chelsey Youman. We have been talking about Dick's Sporting Goods, the Second Amendment, and all that and more this show today. But one of the points that we made earlier was a caller actually referenced the idea of understanding as well as taking identification of individuals that are not only outside the school but inside the school as well. And that moved into kind of some privacy issues that there's a really great resource for you to be able to access. And Kerby, you've just written a little booklet on kind of privacy and information, correct?
Well, again, it's available to our donors that give at $45 a month level. We give these booklets out to those individuals, but it's on privacy and surveillance. Anybody who's listened to this program program knows when we had John Whitehead on just recently that we are being surveilled in so many different ways. So lots of times when people hear cats say, well, I'm not so sure I want to go with a photo ID. And again, Chelsey and I work in an office where we have to show a photo ID to get in. But at the same time, this just is one of the reasons why there's so much hesitation right now about what we do or don't want to put in the schools. We start putting up metal detectors, that makes sense, but it looks a little bit more like a secured situation. Arming the teachers, you have some people that have had a question about that. Photo IDs, there are a lot of schools that use those. So those are all questions I think individual parents, principals, and teachers need to evaluate in their own set of circumstances. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer. But if you're concerned about your privacy and surveillance, you better be so. And go back and listen to the interview we did this last week with John Whitehead just to remind yourself, people are surveilling us. The government is surveilling us. If they were surveilling Donald Trump's campaign, do you think they might be knowing exactly what everybody around the table is doing? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Frankie Valli, I can't take my eyes off you. Apparently, he's not the only one. But nevertheless, you can go to pointofview.net and also give. And so you don't have to go over to last week's episode. You can just give, and then you can get this little booklet in. And so pointofview.net. We're going to continue taking phone calls right now. And so we'll jump on over to Gaddy in Georgia. Gaddy, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Am I pronouncing your name right, Gaddy?
Gady.
Gady, not even close, man. I am so sorry. What is your point of view?
I just wanted to talk about, obviously, the guns and the terminology behind them. I think as a minister, a school teacher, and a gun enthusiast, military-grade weapons are not easily accessible to Americans. A lot of times when people say assault rifles, that term simply is defined legally as something that shoots semi-automatic and maybe has a detachable magazine. However, there's not 10 or 20 million military-grade rifles in America. Those weapons are so regulated that it takes about 6 months worth of paperwork and anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000 to get your hands on. Being someone that owns an assault rifle, most people even think that AR means assault rifle, but it's actually an Armalite rifle Model 5th. And when just thinking about that terminology, it's easier for many people that may not be familiar with guns to think, oh, military-grade weapons, they look like military-grade weapons, but they are nowhere even on the same functionality plane. And when looking at that and looking at the Second Amendment, I mean, I've heard several callers say that, the Second Amendment was meant for a militia to defend against the military. And I'm personally thinking that if we were ever in a situation in America, and hopefully we will never be, to where the average citizen had to stand up to a tyrannical government, I personally want to be able to have weaponry that would put me on equal plane. And given our current political situation, whether it's just talk or whatnot in the media, we're talking about foreign governments messing with the democratic elections. We're talking about corruption in our government at all levels. We're talking about whether or not one party rigged the election in defense of the other party. Those are things that actually do precede nations having to have people rise up. And if we ban assault weapons, even though they're not military-grade weapons, if there ever comes a point in a Second Amendment situation where it is needed, the people will not have what they need to defend against such said government. So just the terminology, assault weapons are not military-grade weapons at all. And then just going to the Second Amendment saying, even though there are bad things that happen because people have so much access to guns, so much worse could happen if they did not. So that was just my point of view.
Let me ask you a question real quickly. This is Kerby. I just was wondering, you hear people all the time saying the Second Amendment, it's just about muskets and flintlock pistols. But in light of what you just said, it seems to be something that relates a lot more to having the same kind of firepower that a criminal, a terrorist, an insurgent, or maybe even a tyrannical government would have. Is that fair?
Oh, yeah, and most people don't realize that, there were submarines during the Civil War, that the Gatling gun was, preceded the Civil War, and that muskets and flintlocks, one of the reasons that Americans were able to defeat the British in the Revolutionary War is because we didn't have smoothbore rifles for all of our militia. We had rifled barrels that were allowing our guys to make shots at 100 to 300 yards where the British soldiers could not. So we won because the militia out-weaponed the British military. So they had very sophisticated weaponry even during the time preceding the writing of the Second Amendment.
That's fascinating. I have learned something new just by taking your phone call. So thanks so much for calling in, Gaddy. We appreciate you. I didn't see that. I didn't watch or listen to that in Hamilton.
No, that didn't come up in the play, did it?
I didn't. And so I'm grateful that happened. So let's go one more time over to Larry in Indiana right now. Larry, are you there?
Yes, thanks for taking my call. I'll be very quick. I know you're near the end of your program. I believe that any kind of limitation of weapons or the right to bear arms should be handled through either a constitutional convention or a convention of the states, because of the 10th Amendment. This power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. That then also goes hand in hand with Article 4, Section 4, where the United States guarantees every state a Republican form of government. So it either has to be handled by the states or through an official amendment to the Constitution, and not through the judicial branch of the courts.
Thank you so much for your comment, Larry. I'm of the mind. I've been reading Ray Dalio's book, Principles, and I'll get there to a second. So Ray Dalio says when he was transitioning out of Bridgewater, there was just this really good nugget that he said. He always said that the system of governments has to be more powerful than the person to kind of keep from disorder and chaos, and in this particular instance, tyranny from happening. And it was extremely important for there to be systems and structures in place that were more powerful than the individual that was leading those systems and structures. Kind of that checks and balances. And it seems like what Larry's alluding to is just a need for checks and balances, right? We just need to make sure that there are certain capacities and protocols that are in place that if we're going to make such a significant move, like trying to alter the Second Amendment, we need to go through the systems that have been put into place by the founders that established the Second Amendment, right?
That's right. The responsibility would be on our legislature to make those decisions, and hopefully on a state-by-state basis. Different states are going to fall in different categories on this.
Yeah. And so, well, that has been today's program. And so, Kerby, I think we talked a little bit about this. I think we heard some points of view today.
I think we did. And let me just give you a plug, and that is that the Daily Briefing is one of the articles we've posted there. And if nothing else, you can read all the content. And at the very end, you can watch the video that you recommend for people to watch somebody on a treadmill that had Michael Jackson moves. Is that kind of what you do when you're on the treadmill?
It's exactly what I do. If you do not move when Michael Jackson is playing in your ears, you need to consult your doctor immediately.
So again, you got content, but you got fun. I do recommend the Daily Briefing by Nick Pitts.
Thank you so much. And so that has been today's show. Chelsey, thank you so much for joining us. Chelsey Youman of First Liberty Institute. And then we've also got Kerby. Kerby, thank you again for giving up the host chair for another day. And so we will be back here tomorrow. So be sure to tune in or check out the website, pointofview.net. And we'll see you here tomorrow.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand together. If you have not signed on, please do it now. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Set up your monthly gift by clicking the Truth Team 360 picture and then carefully follow the directions. Pointofview.net. By phone, you can give at 1-800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Or call us 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you,